one of the quotes from the book that I think is my favorite quote. I think I'm going to get it tattooed like on my arm. It comes from Latin where it's verum ipsum factum. What that means is you only know what you make.
I'm Ginger and I'm a doctor based in Taiwan and also a YouTuber. And I'm currently on a trip with my family in Italy. And
Hmm.
so I'm really excited to have this chat with you, and because I have reading your articles on Fortis Labs and both of your two books, and I really love the concept of building a second brain and the para method. And I would like to ask you that, can you share about your story that how you discovered these two concepts and arrive at this point at your career?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Let's see. How did I discover? Well, the concept of a second brain in general really started with a chronic medical condition. I had this pain and tension in my neck and my throat, and no doctor could tell me anything, any explanation, any cause, any diagnosis. And so I just started researching. I almost became like a part-time, researcher, just reading papers and trying things to try to fix my own problem.
Yeah.
And I generated so many papers and documents and articles and highlights that I needed a place to organize them. That was the beginning of Second Brain.
So like you just research all these information and you like create the building a second brain to store these information.
Exactly. That's all it was. It was just to organize my medical information. But then once I resolved that issue, I said, wait a minute, I can use these for my studies. And then I can use this for my career. And then I can use this for my business. And then I can use this for my blog. I just got the same approach to organization and started using it in all aspects of my life.
And so like how do you just make this into a system and spread it to all other people?
Yeah. I mean, for years and years, like 6, 7 years or more, I just used it for myself. And then I just started teaching people, like my friends or my colleagues. I would say, "Oh, I would notice that their computer is a big mess." And I would say, let me help you organize that." And I would help them. And they would say, "Oh my God, that's amazing. That's so much better. That was so easy for you. I feel so much less stressed, less overwhelmed." And after doing that, 5, 10, 20 times, I thought, wait a minute, maybe there are more people out there like me who are overwhelmed with information. And that's when I started writing my blog and teaching my course and writing eventually the books.
I've been struggling with organizing my information and all the books I read and articles I read. And yeah, I really love the idea of building a second brain. Can you just explain what is a second brain to the audience in Taiwan and what's the impact to your life like recently?
Yeah, absolutely. So a second brain is just a central place outside of your head where you keep your most important information. That's it.
Yes.
Now, I recommend that you do that digitally, right? Because technology has many benefits, but you could also do it in a notebook or in a big binder or whatever. It's an idea that has been around for many centuries in many countries. Uh, Different societies felt the need to have a record, a place where all the records were kept. Except with a second brain, it's at the level of not a whole society, but just one person.
Yes.
One single person's important information. That is a second brain. And the type of software that I recommend is a digital notes app, which can be Apple Notes, Google Keep, Microsoft OneNote, Notion, Obsidian. There's many different options.
I think you've used Evernote for your second brain in the early years. And
Mhm.
like prior to Evernote, did you use like paper or other digital apps?
Yes. I've had 4 second brain platforms.
Oh,
The first one was paper,
yes.
and I really tried to make it work. I had folders and all these different things, but it was too much. And so I had to move something more powerful,
Yeah.
which was Microsoft Word.
Oh,
So I had one Microsoft Word document with all my notes in one gigantic document, but then that got too crazy because there was too much for one document. So I moved to my third one, which is Google Docs.
Oh, yeah.
And there I could have multiple documents and I could create links between them and different things. And then that wasn't powerful enough. And I moved to Evernote, which is the fourth, which had other benefits, such as being accessible on my smartphone. But those are the four I've had, and I'm still on Evernote. It's been over 10 years that I've been there. And in the future, maybe I'll switch to a different one, but for now I'm happy with Evernote.
Oh, I thought you've tried Notion or like Obsidian as your second brain. So it's like you have been using Evernote and not considering switching to other apps.
You know, I've often considered switching apps. I tried Obsidian for a while. I've tried Notion. I still do use Notion,
Yeah.
especially for the team,
Oh,
right? Evernote is great for individual use, but for collaboration and for groups, it doesn't work at all. So we have to use Notion for team. And what I would make a distinction, which is your second brain actually isn't just one app.
yeah. Oh,
Right?
yeah.
If you look at the average, modern person, digital person, I don't know one, tech savvy person that only uses one app. We all have, you look at our phones, right? And what do you see? Many, many different pages of apps, right?
Yes.
So I would describe your second brain as the whole ecosystem. It's like the whole collection of different apps that you use to keep information. So Evernote is the main one for me, but I also use Notion, also use Google Docs, also use Apple Notes. Like I have a few different ones that I use as part of this ecosystem.
Oh, I'm interested in that when you encounter an interesting topic, like when you read a book or an article, do you start with a specific topic and take notes about it, or you just came across an interesting idea from a book and you will document that information?
Yeah, I'm always, if you followed me around on a day-to-day basis, you wouldn't see anything different, right? Like I'm not this like super, disciplined productivity machine. I'm just going through life and, reading books that I find interesting, listening to podcasts, having conversations, watching movies, like pretty casually, right?
Yeah.
Except I'm just doing one little thing differently, right? Like 99% is the same as everyone else. There's just 1% that I'm doing differently, which is when I come across a piece of that content that is really resonant, that is beautiful, that is inspiring, that is unusual, that is convincing, I just extract it and I save it,
Yeah.
right? And that could be anything, I could be reading a book, and if there's one sentence, a quote that I like, I just write it down in my app. If I'm walking out on the street and I see a beautiful scene, I just snap a photo and save that photo to my notes. Even movies. Sometimes I'm in a movie and a scene or a piece of dialogue really moves me. I'll later, after the film is finished, I'll write down that scene. And so when I open up my notes app, I have all these little bits and pieces of sights and sounds and texts and quotes and poems and highlights and very diverse and very unusual material that I can then explore and just see all the interesting stuff that I've collected.
Yeah, like if you collect like these information, but is there a specific topic that, for example, like I've read an information from a book and you wrote down some quotes, maybe like weeks and months after, and is there a trigger that will remind you that you've been taking a notes from this book and you want to retrieve it to use it in your future like articles?
Yeah, there is. And this has to do with the para method,
Yeah,
right? So what I advise people to do, because you're right, this is a problem, is you can save all the stuff, save, 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 collect, collect, collect. But then in some future date, how do you know or remember all the stuff you've collected,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's like you have some sense, oh, I think there's something interesting in there, but you can't remember the details,
yeah. Yeah.
right? And so what I advise people to do is to create categories,
Oh,
right? Don't just dump it all in one giant pile, right? Like create some little categories. And those are the categories of para, right? It's the projects
yeah,
that you're working on are wonderful categories. It's the areas that you're responsible for,
yeah.
the different areas of your work and life. It's resources, like the things you're interested in, the things that you're curious about. And then it's archives, which is everything that's old, right? So there's a funny thing where when you have somewhere to put things, you will find more of those things,
Uh,
right? if you had a box on your desk labeled, uh, interesting words, you would start to notice interesting words all throughout your life.
Oh,
So that's what Para does, is it gives you a set of containers that are just waiting for you so that when you notice those things in life, you know where to put them. And then also, to answer your question, when it's time to revisit them, you know what the existing categories are that for you to look inside.
when you're taking a note, and what's your strategy for naming the notes in a way that is easily for you to discover and reappear when you just need it for them?
Yeah, I find that note titles are not that important. And the reason is usually that the most common way that I find a note is through search,
Uh,
right? And with a search, it's searching the full text, the full contents of the note.
yeah.
So the title is nothing special. It's just the first line of the note,
Oh,
right? But what I find usually is just don't overthink it. I usually just the first thought of what this note is, I just try to very plainly, very simply say what it is, right? So, if I had notes on this call, let's say I was over here on the side taking notes, it would just be called Taiwan Book Launch March 4th, 2024. Very straightforward, very simple.
can you show your process about how you wrote an article? Like there are various notes you've taken, and when you want to write an article on a specific topic, and how do you retrieve that note from your second brain?
Sure. Yeah. This is one of the best use cases for a second brain is basically I want to do a piece of writing and I have a sense, an idea of what I want to write about, but I want to draw on many different sources,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like I don't just want to say my opinion. I want to have facts and statistics and studies and stories and examples. That's how to make writing better is you have specific details,
yes,
right?
yes,
So the way that I do that, it's a little messy, but basically what it is I create a project folder. For me, a piece of writing is a project,
yes,
right? Even like a simple blog post, that's a project because usually I'm not going to sit down in one sitting and write an entire blog post from beginning to end, right?
yes,
It's going to take multiple days or multiple weeks, and so it's a project. So I go into Para, I create the project folder, I title it, article on whatever the topic is. And then from that point forward, it's just a matter of exploring all through my second brain, trying to find everything relevant to that topic, and then just putting it all in that one folder,
yes,
right? And there's different ways that I do that. One way is doing searches,
yes,
right? Like I just do a search and then I look through the results. If there's any that are relevant, I move them into the folder, right? Sometimes I do searches of related terms.
relate,
Right? Like if I'm writing an article on, I don't know, marketing, I could do a search for the word marketing, but also a search for sales and also a search for business development
yes,
and other related, synonyms. Another way is just looking, you know, because everything in your second brain, no one else put anything in there. It was only you. So everything that's in there is interesting just for you.
yes,
And so I find if I just kind of click around and I look this way, I look that way, I look for anything that catches my attention, look for any images, I always find things. It's kind of like looking through your house.
no,
When you just kind of walk through your house and you see little things that catch your attention.
yeah.
I think between those two methods, basically searching and just looking around and poking around, I usually find easily a dozen or 2 dozen sources that I can use.
How long does it takes you to from organizing your notes and to a full article?
Pretty fast. I wouldn't spend more than maybe an hour at most looking through my notes.
Yeah.
That's long. Usually it would be shorter than that. But if you think of it this way, I can see a note and click on it, and then within a few seconds, because all my notes are quite short, they're just little snippets, right? I can tell within 5 to 10 seconds if that note is relevant.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
So with that speed, in 1 minute, I can look over 5 to 10 notes, which means in 1 hour, I could look over, I don't know what that math is. Let's say 5 notes times 60, 300 notes.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Think about if you were doing this research from scratch, how long would it take you to review 300 sources? It would take you weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. So like is your note all using the progressive summarization technique?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
that will cost a lot of time when you do that technique.
It can, which is why you don't want to do it to every note.
Oh,
Right. I think I said this in the book is you don't want to be like, oh, I saved, 10 notes. I have to progressively summarize each one. You only do the progressive summarization when you're preparing to use the note.
yes, yes,
Because then you know what it's for, how you're going to use it, what the purpose is.
yeah.
And that's how you justify the time and effort to put into it is because you're about to use it in something important.
Yeah, yes, yes. I really love the progressive summarization technique because it's like you just keep what you need and the original article is still there when you want to explore other information. And
Totally.
I'm
Exactly.
interested that how do you handle the information that's intriguing but lacks a direct project or purpose?
Yeah. Sometimes I just make up a project.
I came across many information that I felt interesting, but I didn't know what their purpose is. But I really want to save it because it's really resonates to me. Like, how do you handle these information?
Absolutely, yeah. So sometimes I just make up a project. I almost pretend like there's a project. But this is why you have different letters of para, right? Some things are project, other things are area, like you don't even care about it, but you have to keep it.
Yeah,
Like you're responsible for your taxes or for your bills or for your house or something. And then that third letter, resources, that's for things that you're talking about, things that you're curious about, things that you're interested in, and you don't know why, you don't know how it will be useful, if it will be useful, but it's like just in case,
uh,
right? That's what goes in the resources.
oh, so you just save it as a resource, and when you have you create a project, and then you go to the resource and then search for like information you need.
Yeah, that's very common. So often, when you start a project, you don't want to start from nothing, from zero.
Yeah.
So an excellent way to start a project is to look through your resources,
Oh,
right? And see what material you have. If you already have a bunch of gardening, clips from gardening articles, maybe you should start a garden. If you already have a bunch of advice on how to play tennis, maybe you should do a tennis related project. In other words, choose your projects based on the insights and the research and the knowledge you already have.
yeah.
That way you're not starting at ground zero, you're starting at, like quite advanced.
Yeah, you have mentioned that you have your 12 questions when learning or reading books. How do you choose that 12 questions? What are some questions can you share with us?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a technique from my first book, Building a Second Brain. So there's a kind of an issue with the second brain, which is you're keeping information for the long term,
Yeah,
right? It's not for 1 week or 1 month or even 1 year. This is information that you're going to revisit in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, maybe even 10 years, right? And so that time scale is much, much longer than any specific project,
yes.
right? It's like projects are happening very fast, but you're saving information for a lifetime, for the long term. So you need a filter for what information to keep that transcends projects,
Yeah.
that is bigger and longer term than projects. And so I developed this technique based on a quote from Dr. Richard Feynman, who is a Nobel Prize winning physicist.
Yeah.
And it's just to have, I find most of us already have this, these open-ended questions about like the world or about humanity or about the economy or about our field or our company that we're always curious about, that we're always wondering about, often since we were quite young, right? And they usually don't change, or if they change, they only kind of evolve. It's the same question, but kind of evolve. And the way I have people identify this is just to ask themselves, what have you always been curious about? What question have you always been asking? And you can even ask your parents.
Yeah.
What was I fascinated by? I was fascinated as a child by Legos.
Oh,
I loved Legos, and my parents told me you just loved to play with Legos for hours and hours and hours. And today, as an adult, in a way, I'm still interested in that because I still am fascinated by how you get building blocks and then combine them together,
yeah.
right? Like today, I'm doing it with notes. but it's the same thing that I was doing as a kid with Legos.
Yeah, I love the famous 12 favorite questions. This is really a good technique for keeping informations you're interested in. And I've read the book like David Allen's Getting Things Done, and I read your book Building a Second Brain. And I thought the concept was similar. Can you explain that? What is the difference between getting things done and building a second brain?
Yes. Yeah, getting things done, which is also known as GTD, has been was an essential part of my education. I remember I started my first professional job and I was in my 20s. I had no idea what I was doing. I read that book and it gave me like a game plan for how to be a professional. I see my work as an extension of GTD.
Yeah.
All the
Mm.
principles of GTD are still valid, they still apply, they're still important. But if you think about all the information in our world it's in two categories. There's actionable information,
Yeah.
and then there's reference information,
Yes.
right? Actionable information is things you have to do, to-dos, tasks, like things on your to-do list. And that's the focus of GTD,
Yes.
right? GTD was always about the actionable information. What Second Brain does is talks about all the other kinds of information, which is the reference material, the notes, the plans, the documents, the web clippings, the bookmarks, the songs, the photos, the music, all that other stuff over here is Second Brain. So together, they're almost like right hand and left hand. They work together very well to manage your entire information life.
So like building a second brain is bigger than GTD. Is that correct?
I would say that it deals with more kinds of information.
Okay.
Like it has to encompass a much wider variety of different kinds of content.
Really love the concept of GTD and building a second brain. And I have some question like in terms of our personal growth, the express component of your code method is very important. And for those of us like me and you are both creators and we express through, like me, I express through YouTube videos. What recommendations do you have for people without a public platform to share their knowledge?
Yeah, I would say it really doesn't matter whether it's public. That's just, the whole creator thing, the creator economy, that's very recent. That's just the past 10 years. But self-expression, which is another word for creativity, that's the oldest thing there is. That's centuries, millennia, right? So I would really advise people don't get caught up in the platforms and the social media and the followers and the metrics and the views and all those things. If you want to, you can, if you want to be a professional creator. But I really believe that every human being, every single person has a need, a fundamental need for self-expression.
Yeah.
It's not optional. It's not only for artists or creators or YouTubers. You must for your psychological well-being and for your sanity, you need some way of expressing yourself. It might just be to your spouse or your kids or one friend and colleague that you have at work or your neighbor or a stranger you meet in the grocery store, right? And part of this realization comes from my medical condition that I had, which on some days made it so hard. It was so painful that I had trouble speaking.
Mm.
And because I couldn't speak, I started to spiral into depression and despair. My life got so dark and terrifying because I lost the ability to express myself, right? And I'm an introvert. Like I enjoy being alone. I like to be by myself.
Oh,
But even for an introvert, I found that the need to express myself was essential.
yeah.
So I would say just find a way to do that. It can be telling a story, about something that happened to you today to a friend. It can be writing down some poetry. It can be journaling.
Yes.
It can be doing some watercolor painting. It can be playing a song on the guitar or the piano. It doesn't matter what it can be making a sandwich.
Oh,
My dad is an artist and he makes beautiful paintings, but he is also very creative in how you'll open up a sandwich and have the most unusual ingredients in there.
yeah. Yeah.
So I really think our lives are full of opportunities for creativity.
Yeah.
Every minute there is something in your environment or something happening in your head that you have an opportunity to be creative and just to express yourself.
We've talked about that you've using the Evernote as your note-taking app, and I use Notion as my second brain. Do you have some recommendation for note-taking apps for people or just writing on paper?
Sure, yeah. I take a lot of notes on paper. I think paper and digital are great complements.
Yeah,
It's not like, oh, I have to choose one or I have to choose the other, and then I can never, change. They're like two pieces to the same puzzle. They're like two sides to a coin. I think it just depends on the situation.
if you take a note on the paper, and how do you combine with your digital apps?
Sure. So I often take notes on paper if I'm meeting with people. Because I found if I'm meeting with someone and I'm on my computer or on my phone, they kind of get like, are you listening to me? Are you on Instagram? Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
So when I'm with people, I like to take notes on paper. And then I just have a practice like during my weekly review where I just go through my journal. It's like a paper notebook.
yeah,
And if there's any parts that I want to save digitally, I just take a photo. And most note-taking apps have a very effective capture system
yeah.
where it will either just save the photo directly or it will turn the writing in the photo into digital text.
Oh, your second brain is the para method and across different digital apps. If you're using Notion and if you're using the Google Excel or Notes, and how do you combine all these notes from different digital apps? Like some in Obsidian, some in Notion, some in Evernote. Because I think
Yes,
that Notion is more like a project management app, but like Rome or Obsidian, it's like writing app. I've struggling with these two apps, how to use these two apps, manage my knowledge for a long time.
absolutely. So a couple things. This is where para is so essential,
Yeah,
is because you do have to use multiple apps.
yeah,
You do. Your information will be spread across multiple different places,
yeah,
right? So the only way that that is manageable is if you organize the information the same way in every one of those places,
yes,
right? Like you can use five or six different apps, but if you try to organize every app in a completely different way, so every time you switch from one to the other, your brain has to understand a whole different way of organizing. That's hopeless. That's very overwhelming. And so para is an agnostic way of organizing. It's a way of organizing content in any place. So I have para in my task manager, my to-do list. I have it in my Google Drive. I have it in my Evernote. I have it in Notion. Every single one of the main places that I have information is para, and not just para, but the same categories, the same projects across all of them, the same areas, many of the same resources.
oh,
Right. So to answer your question, if I have a project, I can look in Google Drive and I see the same project. I can look in Evernote, same project. I can look in my task manager, same project, which means my brain knows and can connect the information in each of those places very seamlessly
oh.
because it's the same definition, the same list of projects.
This is really good because I used Rome and Notion for a while, and like Rome is my creating app and Notion is my project app. Sometimes I have like my idea I will put in the Rome, but some gathering information I'll put in the Notion. And I have find it difficult to combine these two together. But like as you said, the para method will solve this problem, and I really like this concept.
Yeah, sometimes you can connect them.
Yeah,
Sometimes there's a way, like Notion will have an integration with, I don't know, Miro or some other tool.
yeah,
And sometimes you can use a third-party service like Zapier. Zapier is a tool that allows you to connect two apps together, but it's not always possible,
yeah.
right? It's not always possible. And sometimes you don't want to do that. Sometimes you want the silos. You want information to be very separated
Yes,
and you don't want it mixing together, right?
yes. So could you share a concept or a phrase that have influenced profoundly for your life, or like one sentence that have crucial impact on your life?
Yeah, I mean, one of the quotes from the book that I think is my favorite quote, I think I'm gonna get it tattooed like on my arm.
Yeah,
it comes from Latin where it's verum ipsum factum. And in English, what that means is you only know what you make.
Um,
You only know what you make. So what that means is when you read something in a book, you read a piece of knowledge, you don't have that knowledge,
yes,
right? Like reading something in a book does not transmit that knowledge to your brain.
yes,
What really makes sure, like, how do you know if knowledge is in your brain is if you actually use it. You make something, you create something. And if it works, if it's effective and it turns out right, then you can say, I know that. So basically that every time I remember that quote, it reminds me, don't just consume. I think there's so much, like, the internet is so full of amazing content now. You can spend all your free time, night and day, just consuming, and spend your entire life just consuming,
yeah,
right? But that's not what create consumption by itself does not improve your life.
yes.
It improves nothing. It's only taking what you've consumed and then applying it, integrating it, digesting it, testing it. That's where the value comes from.
Yes, I've been making videos for like 2 years, and I really agree the concept that you learn the things when you express. If you didn't express, you just consume a lot of things, but you didn't really understand it. So
Yeah, another way to understand that is, nothing you consume goes on your resume, on your CV.
yeah, yeah,
Nothing.
yes.
Only what you've accomplished or built or created can go on your CV.
I'm really happy to have this conversation with you, and I really learned a lot from your two books.
Oh, thank you, Ginger. It was a pleasure. And thank you for the amazing content you create as well. I'm a big fan of yours.
Thank you very much.